Well, hello and welcome to Ada Bible Church Online, and happy 4th of July. And no matter how you are spending this holiday weekend, I hope it is filled with fun and relaxation with family and friends. My name is Tom Skilling, and I'm one of the small group pastors here at the church, and I'm just so glad that we get to spend this time together. And I just want to give a special shout out to those of you that are tuning in for the very first time. So glad that you are here. Well, hey, at this time, we get an opportunity to sing songs of praise to our God. So I want to turn it over to our worship team.
We get to carve out time today together just to turn our gratitude and our thanks to our God. So would you join me as we sing? How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. One more time. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Jesus, in all things, I've seen a glimpse of your heart. A billion years, still I'll be singing. How can I praise you enough? How can I praise you enough? 'Cause you are the Lord Almighty, shining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compares. Creation calls all to the Savior. We are alive for your praise in earth and sky. One is higher. Our God of wonders, you reign. Our God of wonders, you reign. 'Cause you are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean. Nothing else compares. Not to us, but to your name, we lift up all praise. Not to us, but to your name, Jesus, we lift up all praise. Not to us, but to your name, we lift up all praise. Not to us, but to your name, lift up all praise. You are the Lord Almighty, shining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compares. 'Cause you are the Lord Almighty, outshining all the stars in glory. Your like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compares. You give life, you are love, and you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, and you restore every heart that is broken. As great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness. You give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. As great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. We pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Cause all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Are you Lord? Yes, all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, and these bones will sing. Are you Lord? Yes, all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, and these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Compassion, love that's never failing. promise of a Savior, the hope of nations. My Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. The author of salvation, He rose and conquered the grave. Yes, Jesus conquered the grave. So take me as you find me, with all my fears and failures, and fill my life again, as I give my life to follow everything I believe in. So I surrender. My Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. The author of salvation, He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. So shine your light in, let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light in, let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. 'Cause you're the name above all names. You are worthy of all praise. And so my heart will sing, how great is our God. Yes, you're the name above all names, and you are worthy of all praise. And so my heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. All will see how great is our God. God, we gather today here in this room, and also people tuning in online from all over, because we want to carve out time just to recognize how good you are and how great you are. So God, be exalted as we sing your praises, as we tune our hearts to your goodness, as we seek to live out your light in the world around us. God, through all these things, may your name be lifted high. May your name be great. We ask these things in the name of Christ.
Isn't it wonderful how worship can just remind us of who God is and what He has done for us? Well, hey, I don't know about you, but we are already in the month of July. And doesn't it just feel like summer is quickly passing us by? Well, here at the church, we would love for you to stay connected no matter where your summer plans may take you. And there are two primary ways that you can stay connected here at the church. And the first is by downloading the Ada Bible Church app. And on the app, you can stay connected to all of our weekend teachings, and you can also follow along with our Beyond the Weekend daily devotional. And the second way to stay connected is to head to adabible.info. Have you ever wondered, hey, what's happening this week at the church? Or, hey, I always wondered about that one ministry. You can find your answers at adabible.info. And the other thing you can do at adabible.info is leave us your prayer requests or let us know how we can care for you. You see, we really believe that life is not meant to be lived alone. And if you're going through something, we would love to know about it and come alongside of you. And so head to adabible.info under Contact Us, and you can leave us your questions or your prayer requests. And you're welcome to leave them anonymously, or you can leave us your name and contact info, and a pastor or director will reach out to you in the very near future. Well, hey, at this time, we get to hear our weekend teaching from our senior pastor, Jeff Manion, as we continue the sermon series we're in, 10 Questions Jesus Asked.
Well, good morning. And yes, I just love the groovy music we selected for this series. And those of you that are at our other campuses at Kentwood and East Paris and Knapp Street, I'm just so pleased that we get to be together today. Those of you who join us online as well, for the midpoint of this series called 10 Questions Jesus Asked. This is our summer series, and this weekend takes us to question number 5, halfway through. Starting next weekend, I hand off the series to my partner in crime, Aaron Buer, who will take this series from here. Now, the way our conversation is going to flow today, first we're going to do our study. At the very end of our time together, I'm going to take a few minutes to try to give some perspective to a topic that should be important to us. So the teaching first, and then I'll try to secure your attention for a few minutes at the end of the service together for some perspective on that topic. So this weekend, 4th of July weekend, wonderful weekend to begin with a question. Show of hand, please. How many of you enjoy grilling? Show of hands, grilling. Okay, how many of you don't go anywhere near a grill, but from time to time you enjoy eating the food of someone who does enjoy grilling? Okay. Second question, wonderful Michigan question. How many of you enjoy eating meals beside bodies of water? Anybody? Inland Lake, Lake Michigan, Lakeshore, a river? Okay, for those of you who enjoy grilling, and for those of you who enjoy eating meals by water, today is your lucky day. Because our study today takes place here. It's a place called the Sea of Galilee. It's not a sea, really. It's an inland lake in northern Israel. It's about 33 miles around, which means you could hike around it. It might take you a couple days, but you could hike around it. And today's conversation takes place right there at a meal, a breakfast right there beside the Sea of Galilee. So as we get into our teaching today, some of you are going to have a moment where you go, this feels kind of familiar. And if that's true, it's because 3 summers ago, August 2019, I did a message called Breakfast with Jesus from this same story. And so I took some bits and pieces of that message and kind of grafted them into this study today. So if some parts feel a little familiar to you, that's why. What's important is not just where this conversation takes place, but when this conversation takes place. So, technical term for the day. Ready? Technical term for the day, a post-resurrection appearance. Say it with me. Ready? A post-resurrection appearance. Now, there are a handful of these in our Bible. And what a post-resurrection appearance is you have the crucifixion of Jesus, then like 3 days later, what we celebrate on Easter Sunday, Jesus is alive and well, and then he starts showing up and having interactions with his disciples. There are just a handful of these. One of them is doubting Thomas. I'm not going to believe he's back unless I actually see where the nail holes went into his hands and that wound in his side. And then Jesus appears to Thomas and says, okay, check it out. Stop doubting, but believe. This is called a post-resurrection appearance. And so very, very critical, not only that this conversation takes place, but when it takes place. So back to the Sea of Galilee. Breakfast with Jesus on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. It is a beautiful location for a challenging conversation, because it is there by the Sea of Galilee that Jesus looks at one of his disciples and asks the question, do you love me? Do you love me? And this question happens to come after a colossal personal failure. And so, I don't know what you're experiencing as you walk in today, but I can just imagine that there are more than a few who walk in, and very recently, you said something or done something, and you're just kind of going, dumb, 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 and you're living in the land of regret, where just waves of shame are pouring in over something you said or something you did or something that you didn't do. I am so grateful that you are here today, because today's conversation that we get to explore today has to do with what it looks like to be restored, what it looks like to get fully restored, what it looks like to find your way back home after a significant failure. So today's question, do you love me? One, in the Gospels, it's you count them up, there's 307 questions that Jesus asked. This question, do you love me, I think is a pivotal and critical question, particularly after a major life failure. So today's story unfolds in 4 parts, and we just called part 1, Breakfast with Jesus. Breakfast with Jesus. So if you were to open a Bible to John chapter 21, verse 1, you would encounter these words. Afterward, Jesus, what's the next word? Jesus what? Appeared. It's a post-resurrection appearance. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Peter, one of his disciples, after the resurrection, hey, I'm going fishing. Who wants to go with me? And 6 other disciples, they go, okay, we're in. And they go fishing with Peter. Now, this isn't fishing from shore with a fishing pole or fishing from a dock with a fishing pole. It's not even throwing a net from shore. The type of fishing they're doing, they're going out in a boat. It's night fishing when the fish are closer to the surface, and they fish all night. I mean, you just get this. They throw the net out and then they pull it back in. And they throw the net out and they pull it back in. And they throw the net out and they pull it back in all night long, and they catch nothing. They get skunked. And toward daybreak, there's a guy on shore about 100 yards away, and the guy on shore yells out to the boat, "Did you catch anything?" And they go, "No." And the guy on shore says, "Try throwing the net on the other side of the boat." Some of those guys in the boat were not rookies. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were raised on the lake in the fishing industry. Here's this guy on shore giving them advice on catching fish. This had been their trade, their craft, their career. So it's, okay, humor the guy. They take the net, throw it on the other side of the boat, and suddenly the boat lurches. It lunges. It's like every fish in the Sea of Galilee swam toward their net, and they're trying to pull this thing in, and this is where John looks at Peter and goes, "It's him." Splash. Really, Peter jumps into the water, starts swimming towards shore. Well, John and the other guys, they start pulling this net. They can't even get it over the edge. So they start rowing, pulling the net toward the shore. And when they get to the shore, this is what they find. Jesus has started a campfire. Over the coals, he's grilling fish, and he's baking bread right there on the shore. Breakfast with Jesus. This is how the story goes. Verse 9, when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. And then comes the invitation of Jesus. Are you ready for Jesus' invitation? Here it is. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Ah, yes. Some of you have favorite quotes of Jesus. I am the resurrection and the life. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Love your neighbor as yourself. Here's my favorite Jesus quote. Come and have breakfast. I know that many of you in this room just became believers. Jeff, I now believe. I believe in breakfast Jesus. I believe in campfire Jesus. No, you need to absorb this. Now, you don't limit Jesus to this, but please include this in your image of Jesus. This is a multi-sensory experience. Smell the aroma of the baking bread. Feel the warmth of the campfire. Hear the fish sizzle on the coals. And taste the meal he has prepared for you. There's something about this scene of Jesus making a campfire and grilling fish and baking bread. There's something about this scene that should make you want to love Jesus more. This wasn't the first time. In your image of Jesus, there's Jesus as healer, because he healed people. There's Jesus as teacher, like the Sermon on the Mount. There's Jesus as Savior, because he comes and dies for us. But do not miss out on this image of Jesus as friend, the long meals that he had with his friends. And yes, my wife was in the early service today, and after the service, she had a question for me. She said, "Are those my glasses?" And I said, maybe. So we're in John chapter 21, this breakfast with Jesus thing. But way back at the beginning of John's gospel, he's collecting disciples. Philip, Nathanael, Peter begin to follow him. They say, where are you going? He says, come and see. And they come and they begin to follow and learn from Jesus. One of the first stories you encounter is Jesus at a wedding reception. Seriously, Jesus hanging out at a wedding reception. His first miracle is turning water into wine at a wedding reception. That's like John chapter 2, very beginning of the story. But then you turn several pages and you come to the Last Supper. John chapter 13, and again you find him at a meal with his disciples. It's at this meal that Jesus, he disrobes. He takes his robe off, ties a towel around his waist, and he begins to wash the dirty feet of Andrew and Philip and Nathanael and John and James and Peter to work his way around the whole table. But the Last Supper is a meal. And so it starts at a wedding reception, and then there's the Last Supper, and now he's making food for his disciples. And if there's one thing I want you to walk away with today, it's this sensation that there's room at his table for you. In fact, just say these words with me. There's room at the table for me. Ready? There's room at the table for me. One more time. There's room at the table for me. And even as I've had you whisper those words, there are some of you that would just go, Jeff, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me. You don't know some of the things I've said. You don't know some of the things I've done. You don't know me. I mean, there was room at Jesus' campfire for Peter, Andrew, and James. But Jeff, we call these people now Saint Peter, Saint Andrew, Saint James. Jeff, I ain't no saint. There was room at Jesus' campfire for them. I don't think there's room at his table for me. question, anybody sitting around Jesus' fire that day that maybe had done something a little unsaintly? Now this story, what kind of appearance is it? This is a post-resurrection appearance, meaning after the resurrection. If it's after the resurrection, it means it's after the crucifixion. It's after the crucifixion of Jesus. It's also after the trial of Jesus. Anybody at the trial of Jesus who's sitting around the campfire there that did something a little unsaintly? Is ringing any bells with anybody? Maybe Peter, the guy that jumped into the water and swam to shore. Part one of the story, Breakfast with Jesus. Part two of the story, the land of regret. Jesus leaves the Last Supper with his disciples. He's heading to the garden where he will be arrested. Leaving the Last Supper and on the way to the garden, he kind of drops a bomb. He says, tonight, all you guys are going to run. All of you will fall away. And Peter goes, not me, man. Even if everybody deserts you, I will never desert you. I'm more dedicated, I'm more devoted, I'm more committed. Even if everybody bails, I'll never bail. And Jesus looks at Peter and goes, tonight, I mean this very day, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, marking the dawn of a new day, Peter, you're going to disown me like 3 times. And Peter goes, yeah, like that's going to happen. Even if everybody disowns you, I'll die with you. I'll never desert you. Peter follows Jesus to where Jesus will go on trial. And I love this picture here. It's wildly inaccurate based on a first century context, but it has an element that I love, and that is in a lower patio area, in a lower courtyard, there's a fire going, but you can see from here up into the living room of this house. And what I love about this image is that as Jesus is on trial, in a room up above, there is a sight line down to a fire where Peter is warming himself, and it is not going well up there. Jesus is going to get ganged up on, falsely accused, lies told about him, and there will reach a point in his trial where Jesus will get punched out. And Peter is down here, and he's warming his hands by the fire, and he's getting scared. This is the way the story unfolds for us. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, this man was with him. This is one of Jesus' guys, but he denied it. Woman, I don't know him, he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. Man, I am not, Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean. Listen to his accent. He's from up north. Peter replied, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him before the rooster crows, today you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and cried like a baby. He went outside and wept bitterly. Welcome to the land of regret. In our Bible, there are 4 biographies on Jesus. These are in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You know which one of those recounts the story of Peter disowning Jesus? You know which one of those? All of them. Not only was this failure, this was well-documented failure. not only is this failure, this is well-publicized failure. This is well-known failure. This is a failure that early Christians, it was woven into the fabric of the way they talked about the trial, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus. Peter's failure was woven right into it. Welcome to the land of regret. We've all been there, you know. I mean, if we're honest and see ourselves honestly, we all have our moments where we wish we had a do-over. When was yours? You ever wish you had a do-over on something? I mean, looking back to middle school, there was someone in your class that was socially awkward, and there was not only teasing, there was taunting. Perhaps you and a few others did everything within your power to make that kid's life miserable. And you look back and say, yeah, well, that's what kids do. And you look back and say, no, it was mean. I wonder where she is today. I wonder where he is today. You ever wish you had a do-over? You were married and you got bored. Maybe a little lonely, but bored and lonely, and you found out that Facebook is a remarkable tool for checking in on other people who are also bored and lonely. You go, Jeff, it's a mess, man. It's a mess. It's a real mess. You ever wish you had a do-over? Promises that were made to a client, and even as you were making the promises, you knew that there was no way that these promises could be fulfilled or kept, and now it's all coming back. See, if the truth were told, all of us have walked through the land of regret. All of us have at least some point, multiple points in life where we go, I wish I had a do-over on that. I wish I had a do-over on that. I wish I had a do-over on that. That semester at that college, that spring break, that year where you just kind of shut down and zoned out, and your kids needed you, and you were physically there, but you weren't emotionally there because of the way you shut down. I mean, what was it for you where you found yourself in the land of regret and you just wished you had a do-over? You need to know something. Jesus starts this campfire and says to Peter and the others, come and have breakfast. He does not invite Peter to this campfire when Peter feels cleaned up. He invites Peter to breakfast when Peter feels messed up. Come and have breakfast. Come and have breakfast. And Peter doesn't feel very saint-like. But as they're wrapping up breakfast, something's hanging in the air, and it's not just the smoke from the campfire. Something hangs in the air, and it's not just the aroma of baking bread and grilling fish. What hangs in the air is the aroma of unfinished business. I don't think they've talked about this yet. Peter's failure. And so part 3, it's time for a fireside chat. They're wrapping up breakfast, and Jesus looks at Peter, and he asks him a question. Do you love me? Do you love me? When Jesus asks Peter this question, is John 21, it's hard to read. I can't imagine how challenging it would have been to walk through this conversation after a public, well-publicized failure. Do you love me? This is the way the conversation went down. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon, son of John, that is a formal way to address someone. It's like Jesus asking me, Jeffrey Wayne Manion, I have a question. Oh, no. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Feed my lambs. That's interesting. I'm glad that conversation's over with and we can move on to a better topic. Nope. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Round two. Now we're really ready to move on to something else. A third time, a third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And it is killing Peter. It says Peter hurt. He was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Why? Why does Jesus ask the question 3 times? And I don't know for sure. It doesn't say here in the story. I've got a theory that I like. Would you like to hear it? Thank you. The theory is that Peter disowned Jesus 3 times, and now here's the opportunity to re-own him 3 times. 3 times sitting by that other campfire, Peter had said, don't know him, don't know what you're talking about, don't know him. Now here's an opportunity sitting by this campfire to re-own Jesus 3 times. I don't think Jesus is asking the question to shame Peter. I believe Jesus is asking the question 3 times to fully restore Peter. I think Peter needs to know that he's still on the team. And Jesus asks him 3 times to re-own him after he had disowned him 3 times. Jesus is not attempting to shame Peter, he's attempting to restore Peter. And right now, if something warms inside you that goes, is this what it means to be forgiven? It's better than that. Peter is not only finding himself forgiven, he's finding himself reinstated and he's finding himself recommissioned. I need you to dial into this. This is conversation number 4. Conversation number 4 has to do with a new assignment. And this has to do with Jesus asked, do you love me? Peter says, you know that I love you. And then Jesus said 3 expressions here. First time Jesus says, feed my lambs. Second time Jesus says, take care of my sheep. Third time Jesus says, feed my sheep. He uses the language of animal husbandry. Peter, do you love me? Yeah, then take care of them. Peter, do you love me? Yes, then feed my lambs. Do you love me? Then take care of my sheep. Do you love me? Then feed my sheep. Something happens here that's very important. What's very important is to discover that we express our love for Jesus, who we can't see, by taking care of people that we can see. Jesus says, do you love me? And if we say, yeah, I really do, it says, well, then take care of them. Take care of him. Take care of her. Take care of them. What is so powerful here is that we need to discover and we need to understand that for someone to really experience the love of God, often that needs to be mediated through another human being. Let me express it this way through a story that took place, I'm guessing 20, 20 plus years ago, because our kids are now in their like early 30s, and at the time, they were like middle school age. And a woman who attended our church at the time, her name was Linda, and Linda approached Chris and I and said, I want to bring you guys a meal. To which we said, okay, but understand something, nobody was sick. There was no newborn baby. There was nobody recovering from surgery. It was just, I want to bring you a meal. And we do know how to cook. I know how to cook a couple things. Chris knows how to cook a lot of things. But on those days when I am disinclined, either because of lack of time or motivation to cook something, I am highly skilled at going through a drive-through window. And yet Linda said, I want to bring you a meal. So we said, okay. She arrived at the house, I don't know, on a Tuesday night or something like that, and it took her multiple trips between her car and our dining table. Listen, it's been over 20 years. I don't remember exactly precisely what was in those boxes, but I can give you a sense of it. It was either like a full ham or a tray of fried chicken, but it was wonderful, it was delicious, and there was a lot of it. There was like mashed potatoes and gravy, beautiful salad. I do remember rolls that were homemade rolls that were in a basket, and dessert was not only delicious to taste, but beautiful to look at. It was like a homemade pie that she had made, my friends. This was not a meal, this was a feast. This was the kind of meal in its quality and in its quantity that one might prepare on Easter Sunday when they had family over. This, if you looked at our table, it looked far more like Thanksgiving Day. But this wasn't Thanksgiving, and this wasn't Easter. This was Tuesday. At Tuesday evening, and we sat down to this feast. This is why I remember Linda's meal so acutely. I remember that I not only experienced the love of Linda, I experienced the love of God. It might sound crazy, but as we sat down to this feast, it's not only that we experienced Linda's hospitality, it was as if our Father were saying, enjoy this. I see you, I care about you, enjoy this. We felt God's love through Linda's meal. This is so critical because we can sing songs about the love of God and not get it. And I can preach about the love of God, and we cannot get it. Often we experience the love of God mediated through the love of another human being. Someone else can experience God's mercy through your mercy. Someone else begins to taste of God's love through your love. They begin to experience God's grace because of your grace. It's possible for someone else to experience the kindness of the Father through your kindness, and the goodness of God through your goodness. This is why Jesus looks at Peter at the campfire and after the meal and says, do you love me? And Peter says, you know that I love you. And Jesus says, okay, you take care of my sheep. If you love me, take care of him, take care of her, take care of them. Because we express love to Jesus, who we can't see, through loving people, flawed people that we can see. Do you love me? Peter says, you know I do. Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep. Feed my sheep. See, what I'm trying to say here is this, that if you find yourself in the land of regret, I blew it, and you find yourself invited to a campfire breakfast with Jesus, do not be surprised if you find yourself recommissioned and reassigned. Not just to feel forgiven, but to feel like he's calling you and wants to partner with you. Wants you to partner with him in loving and extending grace and showing goodness and kindness to his kids. If you love me, love them. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, not just to feel forgiven, but to feel assigned and to feel commissioned. This is where this story of restoration leads. But if there's just one sentence I want you to walk away with, it's just this sentence right here. There's a place at the table for me. Can you say it with me again? Ready? There's a place at the table for me. Feel the warmth of the fire. Hear the sizzle of the fish upon the grill. Smell the aroma of fresh baked bread. Taste the meal that he has for you. There's room at the table for you. There really is. Now, at the top of our conversation today, just in case you came in late, I mentioned that we're going to explore a section of Scripture, and then after that, I wanted to give some perspective on a topic that should be important for us. And so, let me plead for your full attention for the next few minutes. It was just over a week ago that our Supreme Court overturned the decision of Roe versus Wade that was made some 50 years ago. And this is going to be dominating our news, spilling over into social media, and a ton of personal conversations. And so first, just a word about the Supreme Court's overturning is what it means and what it doesn't mean. What it doesn't mean is that abortion is now illegal. It doesn't mean that. What it does mean is that states are now given the authority to determine on a state-by-state basis how available or restricted abortion will be in that state. And so what's going to be rolling out now, there will be debated state by state by state by state by state how available or restricted abortion will be in that state. Because of that, what this means is this conversation is not going away soon. It will dominate conversation in schools, offices, families, small groups, and churches. And because of that, and because it has the potential to be a very heated conversation and an animated conversation, I wanted to offer a couple thoughts that I think can guide us, hopefully guide you, and these thoughts guide me. And just two thoughts briefly. One has to do with the image of God, and one has to do with the grace of God. I think that the concept or the conversation about the image of God can guide how we think about the unborn. And I think the conversation about the grace of God can guide how we dialogue, how we interact, particularly with people that we disagree with animately. They believe polar opposite from what we believe. And so the image of God and the grace of God. Image of God first. In the very first pages of our Bible, we read that human beings are made in the image of God. And when we read about being made in the image of God, there's something about that ascribes value, importance. The human beings are to be treasured because they're made as God reflectors, as reflectors of the Creator. And I believe that this thing about being made to the image of God extends to an aged grandmother and also to a child yet unborn, a child that has yet to be born, both made in the image of God. Now, this deal about the image of God, this is what motivated early communities of Christians to gain the reputation of taking in children that had been abandoned. In the early centuries of the Jesus movement, it was very common in the Roman Empire. If you had a baby, you didn't want the baby. Maybe you wanted a boy and this was a girl. You would just expose that baby to the elements, leave it on a hillside somewhere, the city garbage dump. Christians gained a reputation for going around, picking out these kids, taking them home, and raising them because they believed that discarded children were made in the image of God. In the early pages of the Jesus movement in our Bible, in the book of Acts, you see special attention given to widows and orphans. Widows and orphans, this was like the most vulnerable in society, and the Jesus community organizes itself around how to care for widows and orphans, the most vulnerable in society, believing that they too were made in the image of God and were to be honored, respected, and cared for. It is this concept of the image of God that leads the family of Ada Bible Church to encourage women to choose to have a baby rather than choosing the option of abortion. But we believe that the image of God thing is not just true about the unborn child, but is also true about the woman. It leads us not only to care for or to treasure the baby, but also to show care and concern for the woman who is often experiencing an unplanned pregnancy, and it's a complicated pregnancy. And this mom too, the woman too being made in the image of God, is what has motivated Ada Bible Church, for years now, to support organizations like Pregnancy Resource Center of Grand Rapids and Alpha Women's Center of Grand Rapids that just know that there'll be women who will feel absolutely lost and alone in a crisis pregnancy, and they provide stuff like diapers and baby formula and stuff like cribs and car seats and strollers. Things like, if you're under-resourced, we're here for you and we'll help you. But it's not just the stuff, it's often personal guidance, it's mentoring. It's if you feel all alone, someone will be here to walk beside you so that you're not alone. It provides spiritual guidance, emotional guidance, and physical help. And so this thing about the image of God, it extends to the elderly, it extends to the unborn, and it extends to moms, to women in a crisis pregnancy. Now, back to those two expressions, the image of God and the grace of God. If the image of God kind of guides my thinking about the unborn, the grace of God guides my interactions. What I'm specifically talking about is how you interact and how you relate to people who may have an opinion diametrically opposed to yours, who hold an opinion that is vehemently different than the opinion that you hold. And my challenge for you is that over the coming weeks and months, particularly around this topic, that if you are in a conversation with someone that you disagree with wildly, that person should walk away from the conversation with you feeling heard, feeling loved, and feeling honored. Does that sound strange to you? Does that sound strange to you? That someone you're vehemently opposed to, in their opinion, in their belief, that they would feel heard, that they would feel loved, and that they would feel honored. It should feel strange to us because we are part of a culture where such a thing is strange. My friends, there's just this current thing going on, and it just seems to be that if I'm right or if I think I'm right, I have now earned the right to dismiss you or dishonor you. It's like, no, my opinion is what matters and you don't matter. And it's like we've reached a point where we try to win an argument, but we can lose the person. And so the grace of God, I believe, should guide the tone and words of our conversation, even when you disagree wildly with the person that you're talking to. There are two words that guide me in this. I want to share them with you. They're the words gentleness and respect. Gentleness and respect. Can you say those with me? Ready? Gentleness and respect. These were written by Jesus' disciple, Peter. You would find them in 1 Peter. The Jesus community is being persecuted. They're seeing some very dark days, and Peter challenges them to live with hope Furthermore, he says, when someone comes up to you and asks you, how is it that you live with hope? You should be ready to give an answer. But when you answer that person about how you live with hope, answer them with 2 words, with gentleness and respect. Now, it's a different context, but I think this is super helpful when you find yourself with your temperature rising and your blood pressure, and you feel just the intensity of a conversation pick up, just gentleness and respect, gentleness and respect, gentleness and respect. In talking to your daughter-in-law, in talking to your mother-in-law, in talking to someone at work that you do not understand, in a dialogue with someone in your small group that seems to have a wildly different view than you do, gentleness and respect, gentleness and respect, gentleness and respect. The idea here is that someone should be drawn more to God's grace because of your grace in the conversation. This conversation about abortion and abortion rights is bound and determined to be freighted with regret. First of all, you might be experiencing some regret right now just in evaluating your words over the last weeks or the last months, and there just might be a moment where you go, man, Jeff, I have been unkind, degrading, dismissive, trying to win an argument and make someone feel like they don't matter, they're not important. There can be a level of regret from that. And I need you to know that there's room at the table for you. Pull up a chair, there's room at the table for you if you have regret over ways that you've handled interactions. And whenever this conversation comes up, I just realize that there are scores of people in attendance today or watching online who either experienced an abortion personally or encouraged somebody else to have an abortion. And as time goes by, as years goes by, there's a possibility to experience a tsunami of shame that can roll in with this, or deep regret over the advice that you gave, what you recommended, or what you did personally. And I just need you to know if you're experiencing that kind of regret, it's my hope that your story does not end in regret. I just need you to know that there's room at the table for you. We love you. And we welcome you. And there's room at our table for you. These 2 thoughts, the image of God and the grace of God, these can guide us in what we think and also how we engage, how we interact, and the tone in which we talk about such thing. It is my hope that the image of God and the grace of God, that these guide us in the conversations over the coming weeks and over what will unfold in the coming months. Let me ask you to stand here at Cascade and also at our other campuses. I get to pray for us as we embark on our weeks. Gracious God, I give thanks that we have been able to be in this space today to absorb your word, to gather around a fire pit, and to see Jesus calling us to dine with him. Gracious Lord, I ask that we might reflect the one who came for us. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our Lord. Amen. Thanks for being here today.